Have a good night, Danny, the receptionist called as I passed her desk. She was tidying up, getting ready to close the place for the night. I gave her a quick smile and a wave before stepping out of the gym and into the crisp night air. My stomach grumbled loudly as I checked the time. 9:47 p.m. In this little town, that meant every fast food spot was already closed. Across the road, the grocery store's lights caught my eye. Their signs said they were open until 10, so I jogged over, shivering as the cold night wind sliced through my damp hair and chilled my neck. I hadn't dried off properly after my shower. The warmth inside the store was immediate, and it made my eyes water a bit. Just as I walked in, a woman's voice came over the intercom. "Attention shoppers, the store will be closing in 10 minutes. Please make your way to the checkout. Thank you, and have a good night." I grabbed a pre-packaged sandwich and headed to the drinks aisle. My focus was on the sad little label of my dinner as I walked, already thinking I might grab another sandwich on my way out. When I finally looked up, my stomach dropped. Standing in the aisle ahead of me was my ex-girlfriend, Jenna, and next to her, her boyfriend, Eric. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a sting. Not from the cold this time. She looked away just as quickly, her expression staying cheerful as she kept chatting with Eric. I turned my gaze downward and moved past them without a word, pretending not to notice. As I walked by Eric, I couldn't help but notice he was huge. At least 3 or 4 inches taller than me, and probably a good 40 or 50 pounds heavier. For context, I'm 6 feet 2 inches and weigh around 205 pounds, so I'm not exactly small. But compared to him? Yeah, I felt tiny. I grabbed a Red Bull and stood there for a moment, wondering why it still stung so much. It had been years since we dated, and she'd been out of my life for just as long. We were 16 when she told me she liked me. That was 5 years ago. We stayed close friends after we broke up, but I never appreciated her the way I should have. When she started drifting away, I was too stubborn to tell her I missed her. My phone buzzing in my pocket snapped me out of my thoughts, the strange analog beeping catching me off guard. Around me, I noticed everyone else in the store looking at their phones with the same confused expressions. An automated message began to play on every device. "This is an emergency alert. Please proceed to the nearest enclosed structure immediately. Lock all doors and windows, turn off the lights, and avoid making any noise that can be detected from outside. If you are at home, close your blinds and fill as many containers as possible with water. If you are in a public space, follow the same precautions. If you are in a vehicle, shut off the engine and lock the doors. Under no circumstances should you look into the fog or go outside. This message will repeat every 12 hours. Please prepare to remain indoors for at least 1 week. This is not a drill. Stand by for updates." For a moment, the entire store was silent. Then chaos erupted. Customers and staff alike scrambled, unsure of what to do. The woman who seemed to be the supervisor headed to the back to turn off the lights, while the cashiers hurried to lock the doors. I pulled out my phone to call my buddy Marcus, who's in the Air Force, to see if he knew anything about this. But I had no signal, none at all. "No way, man. Screw this," Eric shouted, grabbing Jenna's wrist and dragging her toward the sliding glass doors that were now being locked. The lights went out row by row, leaving the store in near total darkness except for the faint glow of a gas station sign across the street and a few dim streetlights swallowed by the thickening fog outside. Eric switched on his phone's flashlight and kept moving until Jenna yanked her arm free. "We can't go out there, Eric. Something's wrong with that fog," she pleaded, her voice rising. "Let me out of here. Now," Eric yelled, slamming his fist against the glass as one of the employees timidly told him they couldn't unlock the doors. "Ari, stop it. Please, babe. Can't we just wait until we know what's going on?" Jenna begged, clutching his arm to keep him from breaking the door. I couldn't help but step in. "Dude, you have no idea what's out there. It could be a chemical attack or something. Just wait until we get more information," I said, trying to reason with him. Eric turned on me, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're kidding me, right? What kind of idiot thinks someone would chemical attack a place like this? Dumbass," he snapped. He had a point. It didn't make much sense. A chemical attack wouldn't explain the lights, the quiet, or the warnings about the fog. But even so, I hoped he wouldn't put it all together. "Let me out," What the hell don't you get, you idiot? Eric roared, his voice echoing through the store. He shoved Jenna off his arm, sending her sprawling onto the hard floor. Without a second glance, he turned back to the glass and pounded on it harder, the sound sharp and frantic. You gotta let him out, I said, helping Jenna to her feet. My voice was steady, but I knew the situation was spiraling. The dozen or so other people trapped in the store had crowded behind us, watching the whole scene unfold. If he breaks that glass, we're all screwed, I added. Just let him out. The grocery worker hesitated, her hands trembling as she finally punched in the code to unlock the doors. The glass panels slid open with a soft hum. Eric glanced back at Jenna, anger twisting his face when he realized she wasn't going to follow him. He hesitated for a moment before storming out, his massive figure disappearing into the fog. The doors shut behind him, and the worker quickly relocked them, her fingers shaking. We all stood in silence, staring at the faint glow of Eric's phone flashlight as it moved deeper into the mist. Suddenly, the light stopped. It didn't fade or flicker, it just stopped moving. Then, the quiet was shattered by a piercing shriek that echoed through the night. Eric's light jerked back toward us as he began sprinting toward the door. He banged on it with wild desperation. Let me the fuck back in. There's something out here. His scream cut off abruptly as his legs were yanked out from under him. He hit the concrete face first with a sickening crunch, his phone skidding across the ground. Jenna gasped, but I clamped a hand over her mouth before she could scream. We all watched, frozen, as Eric's massive frame was dragged backward into the fog by a tall, gaunt silhouette. It was humanoid, but something about it was wrong. The mist swallowed them both, and the last thing we saw was the faint glow of Eric's flashlight, flickering until it was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by soft sobs from Jenna and the others. The reality of our situation sank in, suffocating us. Hours passed. Nobody spoke much. Around midnight, I glanced at my phone. Jenna was curled up on me, her face buried in my hoodie. She'd been crying since we saw what happened to Eric. Everyone had found a spot to settle down, but Jenna hadn't let go of me. Her tears soaked through my hoodie and onto my skin. And God help me, I felt grateful. I hated myself for it. But yeah, I was happy. Selfish as hell. But I missed her more than I'd ever let myself admit. I thanked God I wasn't going through this nightmare alone. Eventually, I drifted off, lulled by the steady hum of the refrigerators, Jenna's soft breathing, and the occasional distant scream that pierced the fog. I woke to my phone vibrating. For a moment, I panicked, but it was just my 7:30 a.m. alarm. The world outside was still shrouded in darkness. The fog was so thick that no sunlight reached us. How far did it stretch? How high did it rise to block out every trace of daylight? I didn't know, and I didn't care. For a moment, I just held Jenna, clinging to the dream of her, even as the nightmare loomed all around us. We ate breakfast in silence. The store had plenty of food to last, so hunger wasn't the issue. By 10 a.m., though, our phones buzzed with a new alert. This is an emergency alert. It is still very unsafe outside, so stay where you are. Keep all the lights off, and do not make any noise detectable from outside. Avoid looking into the fog or standing where you're visible. Cover windows, and if possible, stay in a room that can be locked off. If something is trying to get inside, it knows you're there. Do not confront it. Water and power systems will fail by this time tomorrow. Fill all containers with water now. Another update will follow in 12 hours. I stretched, trying to shake the stiffness in my back from sitting on the hard floor. My legs tingled with pins and needles. Jenna sat nearby, lost in thought. I wasn't sure if she processed the alert, but honestly, what did it matter? The loss of power meant the refrigerators would stop working, but we had plenty of non-perishables. The real issue would be heat. Before I could dwell on it, a loud crash echoed from the other side of the store. Jenna and I hurried toward the noise, finding an older man, probably in his late 50s, yanking boxes of booze off the shelves. He was laughing drunkenly, clearly wasted. Before I could step in, another guy, maybe in his 30s, tackled the drunk man to the ground without a word. The older guy slurred something incoherent, But then we all froze as a loud thud echoed from the front door. Thud, then another, and another. One of the store workers, a young woman, approached the door to see what was making the noise. The moment she peeked out, she let out an ear-piercing scream. Chaos erupted. The glass shattered, and an inhuman shriek ripped through the air. Whatever was outside wasn't outside anymore. I grabbed Jenna's hand and ran for the back of the store. My heart pounded as screams and roars echoed behind us. We reached a storage room door, but it was locked. I yanked at the handle, trying desperately to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I turned to Jenna, pulling her into an embrace. If this was it, at least we'd go together. Then, a quiet PSSSD caught my attention. The store supervisor was holding the door open just a crack, motioning for us to hurry inside. Without hesitation, we darted through. Inside the storage room, we found the supervisor, one other employee, and a customer who had apparently been hiding here since Eric's horrifying end. And now, we waited. The lights were on in the storage room, which was a change after being in total darkness for the last 12 hours. It took a while to adjust, but it was a nice shift. Throughout the day, we heard thumps and bangs, and sometimes something would get knocked over, or glass would shatter. Whatever was out there was looking for survivors, but we were safe in here. Jenna and I made a bed out of a few 20-kilogram sacks of rice, and honestly, it was way better than the hard floor. The other 3 people in the room tried to ask us about ourselves, our lives, but I did most of the talking. Jenna was still grieving, and they understood that, though I did catch her smiling a few times, which was nice. The other guy didn't say much. I figured it was because of what happened to the female staff member after the door shattered, so I didn't push him to talk. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood for socializing either, but it was just nice to have some sense of normalcy after everything that had gone down the last couple of days. On the 4th day, I remembered what the alert had said about the power going out. Turns out there's a backup generator that would keep everything running for another couple of days, but most of the lights in the store were off, so it felt like we were home free. At 10 o'clock on the 4th night, I heard the emergency alert go off from across the room as I lay next to Jenna, since both our phones had already died. I tried to listen in on what it was saying, but I couldn't catch it from where I was, so I got up in the dark and made my way over to the soft glow of the supervisor's phone screen. By the time I could hear what was being said, I only caught the tail end. Be prepared to stay inside indefinitely. You will receive another alert every 12 hours. Thank you. Stand by for any updates. Hearing this made my stomach drop, and I looked over at the supervisor, who wore the same expression. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Indefinitely? Sure, it would be easier for us with all this stock, but what about the people stuck in their homes or cars? How were they supposed to survive this? As I thought about it, I turned around, only to be startled by the sound of the male employee speaking for the first time since we'd been here. "Fuck this," he muttered as he punched in the code for the large door, which let out a loud mechanical whir as it started to lift. I didn't have time to process what had just happened. I didn't have time to be angry at the guy for possibly getting us killed, and I didn't have time to run back to Jenna before I heard her being dragged away by one of those creatures. I could hear her hands dragging across the floor as they tried and failed to hold on. The creature was pale, humanoid, but not human. If you've ever seen a hairless chimpanzee, that's sort of what it looked like. But its limbs were grotesque and way too long for its body, and its face was almost human. Its skin was a light gray, stretched tight over its freakishly proportioned body. I could hear it shrieking, this horrible sound, but its face was expressionless, its mouth barely open as it screamed. That was the weirdest part. I thought all of this as I watched the grotesque creature drag the girl I loved into the consuming darkness of the grocery store. Then, something grabbed me by the leg, yanking it out from under me. I hit my head on the floor, and everything went black. Truth or dare? Jenna asked me. Truth, I replied. Jenna thought for a moment before Sarah, Marcus's wife, who was sitting next to her, whispered something in her ear. A huge grin spread across Jenna's face. Okay, she giggled, shifting her posture and trying to keep a straight face. All right, Danny, if you were stuck on an island with all of us, who would you eat first? I thought for a moment as I looked around at all my close friends. My eyes landed on Max, who was a bit overweight, and I couldn't help but smile, making everyone laugh, including Max, who splashed me with water and joked, "I'd eat all of you before you got the chance." To which Marcus laughed and said, "We believe you, bud," and everyone burst into laughter again. "Okay, Jenna, truth or dare?" I asked. "Truth," she replied without hesitation. I pretended to think for a moment. "Would you?" I started as I stood up in the pool, holding something in my left hand. "Make me the happiest man in the world," I continued, getting down on one knee before her. "And marry me?" I asked, holding a ring out of the water. The gasp from both of my mates and their partners was immediate. Jenna's eyes welled up, and she asked, "Are you for real?" covering her mouth with her shaking hands. I nodded, and she screamed, "Yes, of course I will," before she jumped on me, taking us both underwater as she kissed me. After we dried off and said our goodbyes, Max came up to me. "Hey man, congrats. Honestly, I've been waiting for this day since you two met. Always knew she was the one for you," he said. I paused, looking at him for a moment before replying, "What do you mean? When I first started dating her, you told me she wasn't right for me. It's actually why I broke up with her before." That's when the words hit me like a ton of bricks. Max stared at me, his smile not changing. "How long have you and Jenna been together?" he asked. "Must be about 5 years, right?" "About time you popped the question," he chuckled. But with every passing second, my heart started pounding faster. "This isn't real," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. I woke up. A long tendril slid out of my throat as I fell to the ground, throwing up everywhere. I looked up to see a giant glowing figure with a dozen other tendrils extending from its shoulders. The thing was thin, standing as tall as the streetlight next to it. I tried to make sense of what I was looking at, my eyes scanning its body. At the end of each glowing blue tendril was a person, the tendrils entering through their mouths, as if absorbing something from their bodies while pulsating rings of light traveled up the tendrils. I almost threw up again until I saw Jenna among the bodies attached to the creature. Without hesitation, I reached up to touch her hand, and as I did, I lost consciousness once more. "Unzip the tent, babe. Let some light in," I said, wiping sleep from my eyes and stretching my stiff back, cursing myself for forgetting an air mattress on a trip we'd been planning for months. I watched, admiring my beautiful fiancée as she got up half naked and unzipped our tent. "I hope you slept better than I did," I muttered, lying back down in my sleeping bag. "Babe, you should have taken the air mattress." "I would have been fine with switching places," Jenna replied, opening up her pack and rummaging through it. "Nah, I'm fine, honestly. I'm not letting my fiancé sleep on the ground," I said, my arm covering my eyes, immediately regretting letting Jenna let the sun in. "You're such a man," she joked, tossing me one of the pre-made sandwiches from her pack. I paused, feeling a brief moment of déjà vu as I looked at the sandwich label. Suddenly, I sat up straight. "Jenna, this isn't real. None of this is real," I said in a panic, causing her to stare at me, concerned. "Are you feeling okay, Danny?" she asked. "Did you even sleep?" "Jenna, the grocery store, the fog, the emergency alert. Don't you remember? None of this is real. We're not together. We're not engaged." I blurted out, my voice trembling as I tried to get her to snap out of this illusion. I watched as her face went pale and her eyes filled with tears. "What's going on? What is T-dash?" she started, but was interrupted by a familiar shriek in the distance. I looked outside the tent and saw at least 1,000 of those chimp creatures heading our way, seemingly sensing that we were no longer fooled by this illusion. "Jenna, you've got to wake up," I yelled, watching those creatures close in. "Close your eyes and wake Dash." I snapped back to reality and caught Jenna just as a tendril slid out of her throat, letting her drop. She threw up on the ground as I held her, her eyes locking onto the massive, glowing creature. That's when we took a good look around. In the distance, more glowing creatures were scattered across the town, hundreds of them. "We can see through the fog," Jenna said. I hadn't even noticed until she pointed it out. That's when we heard screaming, frantic and distant. We looked to our left. One of those chimp-like creatures was dragging a man out of his car, pulling him toward the glowing figure. We watched as a tendril violently shoved its way into the man's throat, and just like that, his screaming stopped. The other creature didn't even pay us any attention as it walked away. Jenna turned her gaze back to the bodies connected to the tendrils and gasped when she saw Eric. She reached out for him, but I grabbed her hand. "Jenna, don't touch him. If you do, you'll go back in, and there's no way to know if you'll ever come out. It's like it wipes your memory every time," I told her. "How do you know?" she asked. "Maybe I'll remember the second time." "You won't, Jenna. I went back in for you, and I'm lucky I remembered anything at all," I replied. She stared at me for a moment. "Why did you go back in for me if it's such a big risk?" she asked. I paused, my eyes welling up. "Because I love you, Jenna." An explosion went off in the distance. I saw it over Jenna's shoulder, then another, each one coming closer, each one aimed at those glowing blue creatures. "Run!" I yelled as I grabbed Jenna's hand and we sprinted away from Eric and the mass of glowing tentacles. Another explosion went off behind us as a plane roared overhead. The explosion also set the service station right next to us on fire, sending a shockwave that knocked us off the street. Everything went quiet, and I felt my consciousness slipping away again. The last thing I saw was Jenna silently screaming in my face, worry taking over her expression as she held onto my hands. That's when I noticed a piece of fence sticking out of my abdomen. Shit, I thought. As everything faded to black, I saw a group of military-looking men running toward us, then nothing. I woke up to the voices of Jenna and Marcus talking to each other. I sat up in the hospital bed I was in and immediately regretted it, clutching my stomach in pain. Whoa, lay back down, bud. Just relax," Marcus said as he stood up from his chair and carefully helped me lay back down. Jenna stood up too, tightly holding my hand and kissing me on the forehead. "What's going on? Is the fog? Is it over?" I asked, confused about how we ended up here in a hospital. "No, it's not over. My higher-ups decided we need to start over. Most of the remaining world leaders agree." Marcus paused for a moment. "You two were lucky to survive. Most didn't. Those things, Dash. Those people are still alive, Marcus." I interrupted. "You can't just bomb the world when they're still down there. They're trapped in a trance, living in an illusion that those blue things are creating. I don't know how, but I saw it. Jenna did too. I only got us out because I felt this crazy sense of déjà vu and realized it wasn't real." Marcus looked at me, his face serious. "I know, Danny. We're trying to figure out a way to deal with them without causing more harm. But right now, the priority is keeping everyone still here safe. You and Jenna are the only ones who've had any real interaction with those things and came back. And we need your help to understand what happened down there." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. "I'll do whatever I can, but we can't forget about them. They're still people, trapped in a nightmare." Over the next few months, I told this story to more officials in suits than I can count. I told them how I did what no one else had done twice. I went into the dream, as they call it, and I came back both times. Though I did manage to convince them not to bomb the world and kill everyone, it came at a cost. Jenna cried as I explained the plan. She cried into my shoulder, just like she had that night many months ago in the grocery store when the emergency alert went off. I felt her tears soak through my shirt as I told her I had to go back into the dream to try to wake everyone up. The thought that I might not make it out again was right there, but I had to be strong for Jenna. I just hope that if I do get stuck in a dream, I'll get to go through with that wedding, I said softly, trying to smile. "If you don't come back, I'm coming after you," she replied, tears in her eyes. I wanted to tell her no, that I wanted to be selfless. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't complain if we were trapped together again. That selfish part of me was still there. On November 14th, 2023, an emergency alert was sent to every mobile device worldwide. It warned of a thick fog that would swallow anyone caught in it, and the whole world locked themselves inside. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this. You might be thinking, I don't remember the day the fog rolled in and the emergency alert sounded. That's exactly why I'm telling you this story. This is not real. You need to wake up.